And welcome back to the Nose Plays Thea to the Shattering, part 3 of our Ultimate Beginner's Guide for 2021. I apologize for the poor internet connection that led to the game just suddenly stopping in the middle of the stream at the end of last video. But I did catch it in time to not get too far ahead of myself. So we are still on turn 9. I haven't actually advanced the turn. And we had left off, we were discussing whether or not we were going to pack up our camp and move over one tile so that we could collect wood as well as topaz, because topaz is really valuable right now. But we also need to start thinking about winter time. We have 28 turns, and at some point, winter is going to arrive, and that's going to be problematic if we haven't stockpiled enough food and enough wood to mostly get us through the winter. At the same time, as I pointed out, our seasonal bonus, our seasonal effect is crafting. And so we want to try to get as much crafting in as we possibly can during autumn while we get the bonus to it. Now, it's not completely critical. It just makes things happen a little faster. But it is something that you should try to focus on. So, taking a peek at what we have so far. I need to kind of zoom out here. We haven't uncovered hardly any of the map yet, and that's a little bit of a problem. The first 50 to 100 turns, more like the first 50 turns, you really should have the majority of the main island uncovered if you're planning on sticking around here for very long. The only reason that we're not doing more exploring right this second is because I found one of the most critical resources for the early game, and that is topaz. Topaz is really, really good for the early game. All early characters just have really crap stats. They have really poor carry weight. You don't have a lot of people to begin with in most cases. Most of them are children. And so building a lot of equipment out of topaz in the early game is a really good plan. But it does take a little time to get the gathering done and everything else. So starting with 2 gatherers is very helpful, and that will improve the rate at which this occurs. But all in all, we've got to get this done, and we'll figure it out here shortly. But I think it's taking something like 6 turns to get a stack of topaz, and we can improve that a little bit once we get the tools to gather more topaz, basically. Before I get any further, I did want to check my equipment. I did swap a gathering tool onto him temporarily, and we'll go ahead and put that amber tool on her again. You'll want to check this periodically whenever you swap these things around, but it's a very micro-intensive detail. But moving the tools around is really, really helpful depending on what tasks different characters are doing. So, I think we are actually ready to end the turn at this point. So let's go ahead and do that. And get on with it. Now, I was thinking, I guess at the end of last video, and this might be part of the video that got cut off, I was thinking that I could send my chosen down here to interact with this bee's nest. And if you click on the bee's nest, right click on the bee's nest. Let's see. Left click, right click. So if you left click on the bee's nest, you'll get this little display over here. And this will actually show you all of the characters that are here defending the nest. You can do this on any party or any spawn point, village, things like that, and it will show you what characters are actually defending it. And then if we right click on the characters, we can see their stat line. And so we can see that these bees are not particularly powerful, but they do have a couple of different attacks, mostly physical attacks. Their ability to defend yellow attacks is pretty minimal. And we can see just as we go through here, this one has some different attacks. This one has a bee sting. But as far as yellow attacks are concerned, it's pretty minimal again. Actually, this thing's a little bit stronger than the other one. This is a dragon bee. But this is really helpful when you're out and about and you're trying to figure out, oh, I see an enemy nearby. Is that dangerous? Is that something I should run away from? Or can I sort of just stick around, and if it attacks me, it's no big deal. When you start to see enemies spawning, clicking on them with the left click and then right clicking on the portraits of the individuals within the party can be a great way to figuring out how dangerous an encounter is. As I pointed out, we're not very capable offensively yet. We have no real fighter class characters, and we don't have the equipment to really be fighting very much. So we got to really minimize our interaction with things. So seeing how many of them there are, I've decided that we're going to avoid interacting with the bees at this time. But I'm going to go ahead and end the turn. Okay, so we get a free mental blessing for 2 turns on our chosen. This is part of the story that Theodore gives us. We'll just skip this part. I'm not going to read a lot of this stuff because that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is to give you guys some really good tips. So there is another active quest site up here that we need to go and explore. Also, a light demon. Light demons, we've interacted with one of these previously. This thing is level 13. It has 23 health, and it has a number of different attacks, but its yellow attacks are pretty weak at the moment. So there is the opportunity to maybe attack this thing with yellow combat, similarly to what we did before. We got a point of research done, and this is because of that quest that just popped up. So now we actually do have the ability to grab furs if we want. But I think I'm going to save this point for something else at the moment. Something that might be a little bit more important. There's a lot of good stuff over here. Darkwood, Shadowbone. This actually might be one of the better spots to set up a permanent camp. The only problem that I see so far is that there's not any real food sources around here. We do have some seaweed way over here, but the lack of food sources is a little bit problematic. Okay, so if we go back to the gathering, we can see that we rolled over about 100 points worth of gathering. It will take us 2 more turns to get some more topaz. What I could do is I could break my camp up into 2 groups. And that way we won't lose this progress that we started here. Now, one of the things we will lose is we will lose this progress, but I think that's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and pull both of these characters off of this task. And actually, we won't completely lose this progress because we'll still have a camp here. So we're going to have 2 camps gathering side by side. And because they're close together, anything that fights one camp will also include the other one. Yeah, I think that's what we're going to do. Alright, so we're going to take these 3 characters and we're going to move them over to Expedition 2. Now, one thing I want to do... Let's go... Actually... Man, we're so close. I only need 3 more topaz in order to make my first tool. Well, we're gonna go ahead and split this up for now. I can click this button. This is a real helpful button that was added at some point, where it will actually show you all of the equipment on the character and who's carrying it. I want to take this gathering tool and bring it over here. But gatherers don't necessarily need the gathering tools right now. This one is only good on characters who have a high gathering stat already, so we'll leave it over there. And we'll take this crappy tool and give it to one of these kids. Actually, do I need to take this character over here? I don't think I do. In fact, we can put him on this and let him continue to work on this. And in a couple of turns, we'll use him to craft one of these. Okay. So, now, you see I've got my 2 expeditions, but I'm lacking in fuel and in food. So we're going to have to deal with that. So, if I click back here, go back to inventory, we can turn this off for now. We need to move some fuel and some food over to this expedition. So, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just grab some wood, send it over, and we can sort of figure out about how much we want to send over. So I think I want to send about 11 wood over there. We'll keep 20 over here for now. And remember, wood is only consumed at 1 random unit of fuel per turn that you have a camp or a village. Anytime that you are out of wood, all of your gathering, crafting, everything is done at like 50% efficiency. So it's real important that you have these. You can get by without wood, but not so much without food. So let's do the food thing. And food actually has its own button down here, which is nice. I don't have to drag each individual food type over here one at a time. They made it really convenient that way. And they're giving me 2 options. So I can do a certain number of turns of food, or I can just give a certain quantity of food. And it'll just give you a random assortment. So we're going to do like 20% of our total food over here. That should be more than enough for these guys to get some gathering done. And now you can see those little warning messages have gone away. We're going to go ahead and click Expedition 2. We're going to move them over 1 tile. And I actually could move them over more than 1 tile. I could be up to 3 tiles away. But I don't think there's anywhere better than maybe... I guess if I set up here, I could farm wood or stone. Although I don't really have any need for stone. Yeah, let's go ahead and set up over here. I may end up grabbing the dark wood at some point. So we'll go ahead and set our camp up here. Check our equipment. Make sure that this character has got his gathering tool. And then we can go ahead and get these guys gathering. And with those gathering tools, they're going to be able to do this every 2 turns. They'll be able to collect 6 wood. So they're going to be at a positive amount of wood over time. They'll use 2 to gain 6. That'll help us out a little bit, and that'll just be a little bit more effective with our time and our characters. Okay, anything else that I need to be considerate of this turn? I don't think so. This thing will probably attack one of our camps, and when it does, we'll deal with it, but we're not going to go out of our way to fight it. There are situations where it is important to consider that option, and that is because the types of combat that encounter or that pop up during an encounter different depending on whether you attack them or they attack you. So, for example, there is a specific group of Lightbringers that will constantly harass you, and they will always attack your group with spiritual combat, which is very frustrating if you do not have a good spiritual character that can fight them off. They're not particularly powerful, except in spiritual combat. However, if you actively attack their wandering group before they get to you, you have the option of engaging them in different types of combat, including physical combat. And if you do that, oftentimes your characters are more capable of a physical encounter than they are a spiritual encounter. This is a situation where I'm not sure that it matters. So we're just gonna let it happen. Okay, do I need to do anything else? We do have this point of advancement. I'm not really ready to spend it just yet. But maybe we should look into it. So I've discussed briefly picking up fur leather and also dark wood. The determining factor in picking up one or the other of these things is going to be the kinds of things that we need to build stuff. So if we go to the crafting page and we go to new tasks, we can see all the things that we're able to build. We're able to build gathering tools, and we're able to build crafting tools if we have the appropriate materials. These leather tools are heavier if we were to make them out of leather, but because it would be tier 2 leather, and because there's more units of leather than, say, what we're making with the topaz, we can get some pretty decent gathering tools from those furs. So that's one thing to consider. Looking at the tools benefit from the gems as well, but the other ones include metals and stones. We do have a little bit of stone around us, but we don't have a lot of good metals. There's some iron around us, but no tier 2s that I was able to see. And that would be your steel, your gold, and your silver. So we're not going to be able to improve these all that much with the materials immediately around us. The other tab that we haven't really looked at yet are buildings. This is where we would build a village, and this is one of the things that requires that cosmic seed we got at the very beginning of the game. And so without a cosmic seed, you cannot establish a village. You need a cosmic seed to build an idol for your village, but once you have that set up, it's pretty good. This location, not ideal for a village, and so I'm going to hold off. Unlike many 4X games where you're basically required to immediately get your first city down and then start expanding new cities, this game is a little bit different, and you really don't ever need to establish a village or a city if you don't want to. You can get by just fine in this game without one, just using the camp mechanic as we are currently using. However, if you find a really rich location, it can be very, very good for you to get a village down. And the nice thing is, I don't think this was part of the original Thea 2 release. There is a way to build, say, like a crappy village, just get one started, and then you can go back and upgrade your idol to better materials later on. And so if we were to establish, say, our city with some topaz, which is a tier 2 resource, but we happen to find tier 3 stone later on, which would be obsidian, we could upgrade our idol to that, which would be really cool, and make the city a little bit better, the village stats a little bit better. We'll talk about village stats a little bit later on. You can see we also have access to a raft, a sailboat, and a ship. You always have access to these four buildings or structures at the beginning of the game. So even though you may not start physically with a raft as our party did, when you take a different god as your character's whatever, um, you can build one very early in the game. And all you need is some bone or some wood, a couple secondary materials here. But if you have bone or wood available to you, you can pretty much build a raft, and that will allow you to get around on the water if you need to. But what we really need to do is take a look at this screen, and we haven't looked at this yet. This is where the craftsman can learn all kinds of new equipment. And so there's a number of pieces of equipment that I highly, highly, highly recommend that you get in the very early game. And then there's a bunch of equipment that I would generally avoid, but it's not entirely true that you're going to always avoid these things. There is a random mechanic to the recipes for equipment that varies from game to game. And I'll explain that in detail here in just a moment. But what that means is that every single playthrough is going to require you to have different resources available in the early game in order to build specific equipment. So let's look at that for a second. Every one of these recipes, and we'll look at armor just as an example, every one of these recipes comes with 3 tiers. I'm going to jump out of here for just a second, and I'm going to show you. So tier 1 armor, and then it breaks out into individual types of armor. So you have tier 1 armors, tier 2 advanced robes, and tier 3 expert robes. So let's come back to this. We're looking at robes here, and tier 1 is going to offer you 2 primary crafting sources and 2 secondary crafting materials that you can use to make these. Now what's interesting is that the 4 primary resources and the 4 secondary resources are always going to be the same. So every time you play a game of Thea, you're going to have 2 options for leather and 2 options for gems as your primary resources for leather armor. You're going to have wood, gems, leather, and bone as your secondaries every single time you play the game. The random element comes into effect in which ones you get at which tiers. So you can see we started with 16 leather and 15 gems as our primaries. This could be randomly shuffled in any order every single playthrough. And every one of these materials, every one of these items on this construction list has the same mechanic, where these get shuffled, but the same 4 are always available. What that means is that occasionally I'm going to start a game where the only thing that I can build robes out of at the early game is going to be leather. I could end up with leather and leather as my 2 tier 1 primaries. And in order to get gems for building robes, I would have to unlock tier 2 or tier 3 or both. Okay, so it creates a system where you don't know until you get into the game what materials you're really going to be looking for if you want to build specific equipment. And that also means that the resources that are available to you in the immediate beginning of the game are going to be different from game to game. And you might have great resources for building an axe in one game. But then the next game, because of the shuffle, You don't have the materials near you to build axes, but swords are like way easier to build. And so this is where I would recommend certain items, but it's really going to come down to the materials that you have immediately available to you. So we're going to jump out of here for just a second, and we're going to do a quick inventory. The materials that we have that are really decent for building at the beginning of the game are we have some good bone, some gems, some leathers, and some wood. We have not found high quality stone yet. We have not found high quality metals yet. That doesn't mean that there aren't any, and they might be like right here. We might find them. But at this moment in the game, if I were going to sit down and craft some equipment, I'm going to have to limit the things that I want to craft to the materials that are immediately around me. So jumping back to equipment, I always build tier 1 armors. Tier 1 armors are really, really good. The shielding is important to get on your characters. And there are 3 classes of armors that this unlocks. So you can unlock leather robes, medium class armors, and notice medium class armors have different primary and secondary resources. And then heavy armors. Heavy armors are really, really good at protecting in physical combat. They are extremely heavy and also require a very high strength score to carry. But a character outfitted in heavy armor in a physical confrontation will have a large amount of shielding, so they can tank a lot of damage if you manage to get them equipped with this. Medium armors are similar to heavy armors. They're just a little bit lighter, and they also only provide good shielding for physical combat. They're not very good in the other types of combat. Most characters can wear medium armors, but if you're wearing a medium class armor and your strength score isn't high enough, you might have to like unequip your tools. And so you might be limited to the number of tools or weapons that you can carry at the same time. And then leather robes, robes in general, are very, very weak armors, but they have an added benefit. Robes can also provide shielding in spiritual and mental combats, which is kind of weird, but you've seen in some of our fights already, we have a couple of characters who have a small amount of shielding when we're doing our concept mental challenges or our mental battles. That's coming from the fact that they have a robe of some type crafted and equipped. And so while the amount of shielding is much smaller for light armors like this, they do work in all types of combat and are particularly useful on characters who you know are going to be used in those types of combats. Maybe because they're using relics or spell books or whatever, but they're just more likely to be placed on the table in those encounters. So, I think we're going to go ahead and pick up armors just because I know I can craft some of these things if we start gathering stuff. But before I lock that one in, there's a couple other ones that I think you should really get in the early game, almost every game. So armors is definitely one you should pick up. Jewelry is another one that is very, very important to get early on. Every character, once they're grown up, can equip jewelry, and the main effect of jewelry, the main purpose of getting jewelry is basically bonus shielding. There are some spells and some special cool high quality jewelry. Once you get high enough level, you can craft some of that stuff, and there's some really neat ones that you'll find as it rewards. But just a general purpose, you know, here's a little bit of extra shielding, you can give that to almost every single character. And so this is very valuable. Every character can have one equipped. They're they tend to be pretty rare as drops or things that you find, and they're very expensive if you try to trade for them. So just crafting your own can be a great way to improve your characters. And since all character classes can wear these things, minus like the rats, I think, and a few of the special pets, it's worth getting. So this one and this one are almost universally used by every single character class, and that's why I like them a lot. Once you get past that, all of the rest of these really depend on A, what your character classes are, and B, what materials you have available to you. In terms of just a pure melee attack weapon, I feel, especially in the early game, maybe not in the later game, but especially in the early game, the absolute go-to very best weapon that you can build in Thea 2 right now is the axe. The axe just does its job. It kills stuff. Every other weapon in this game, especially in the early levels when you don't have a lot of stats to rely on, just don't feel like they do any damage. And the special effects or the cool abilities that they add are so weak that they're just ineffective until you get way high level. And then they start to make a little bit more sense. But at the beginning of the game, what you really need to do is you need to get enemies off the board quickly. And the best way to do that is to have reliable damage. And axes, particularly the one-handed axes, but also the two-handed ones, just do the best amount of damage. I can't really, it doesn't show me here what the multiplier is because I actually have to craft one in a recipe. But basically, axes have the highest base damage multiplier. They don't have some of the cool extra secondary effects. They're really vanilla. They just do good damage and they have decent speed. So that's why I like them the best. It's why I basically always start with building axes for all of my warrior melee class characters. Anybody who's going to be in physical combat needs an axe. We also have the battle axe. It's very similar to the axe. It's just two-handed and does more damage. So if you want to have good damage, if you're finding yourself routinely getting in encounters where enemies are getting extra actions because you're just getting them down to 1 hit point and it's just not quite enough damage to clear them off the board, try using axes in your next playthrough. They're very, very effective and probably the most effective. Unfortunately, we don't have good materials for building axes right now. There's a little bit of tier 2 bone, and we do have some stone and some steel, or iron, I mean. But in terms of just good tier 2 materials, tier 3 materials, we don't have any around us, so I'm a little less inclined to just grab this with my current point. Let's take a look at jewelry real quick. So jewelry. See, I have a tier 2 leather, and then I have a tier 2 leather and a tier 2 gem. So jewelry actually does make good sense. We can make good tier 2 jewelry already with both the primary and the secondary materials. So that one could be good. And then there is a special ring that you can craft once you learn this, and that one uses a cosmic seed. There are 2 rings that you can craft with cosmic seeds. There is the one ring and then the other ring. This one you have to learn the recipe for. And the other one, you start. So, yeah, a couple of ways to use your cosmic seed. Build a village, build a ring. There's a few other ways you can use it that we'll talk about when we encounter them. I've been spending a lot of time on this and I haven't been making any good decisions. So let's go ahead and pick up armors. Armors are going to be universally good. We're going to need to collect some gems. And then we'll have to decide whether we want to pick up the furs or one of the bones. But we're going to need to be collecting a lot of stuff here in the short term. Alright, I think we're good to go ahead and end the turn now. And this is that same thing that attacked us earlier. So it'll be very similar to that previous engagement. This is what I was talking about, though. This thing, when it attacks you, will always use this yellow attack. If I were to attack it, I would generally be given the option of all three types of combat as a potential. And so, depending on what I'm good at fighting in, we might want to engage on it instead of letting it engage on us. But we're perfectly fine to go ahead and do this. We want to be careful not to use her too much in this combat because she's already taken some damage. So putting her on the table might be a bad idea. We'll use the Hunter's Mark again and make this thing basically super weak. He does 17 damage with a single swing, so we really only need to get him on the table like one time. And go ahead and start dropping the damage down with the Hunter's Mark. Do I want to use Hunter's Mark again? Maybe. Yeah. We'll save these 2 points. So I currently have 2 points available. We can save them and use them here for Hunter's Mark again. And then these things will basically just not be very effective. Strength of the Swarm. That's fine. Drop you back down to 1. Alright, so they'll do their 1 point of damage. I'll swing for 17. They'll do their 1 point of damage. And we'll do it again. There is a way to speed up combat. If you want to increase the animation speeds, you can do that in one of the settings menus. But very nice. So we took a little bit of damage to our sanity, but nothing that we can't recover in a single turn, so we're fine there. And we got some experience points. Also a mental blessing for one of our characters for some reason. Alright, so we picked up the armors. We should take a moment. And now you see we have 1, 2, 3 types of armor. Let's go ahead and start with the robes. And let's go to the designer and design some robes that we might want to actually craft here shortly. So the first type of robe that we could craft would look something like Topaz and Shadowbone. So when I make Topaz and Shadowbone robes, that gives us 10.6 shielding in all types of combat, which is okay. That'll soak 1 or 2 shots from weak enemies. And it's very light. Bone is particularly light. Gems are a little bit lighter. So this is very, very light. So even children could wear these and still have a little bit of carry capacity left over. So that's pretty decent. If we wanted to go with some heavier robes, maybe for like an adult, this would be probably the best set of robes that we could build in the very early game. So double furs, they're going to be a little bit heavier, but still pretty light at 39 units. And then just slightly more shielding with 12.4 points of shielding. So those are the two main recipes that we're kind of looking at right now. And we can go ahead and add both of these recipes by clicking the little star once we've designed them into our favorites menu. Now, one thing I want to point out, notice that the trash quality down here shows 20%. And that's because we're using improved and wild resources. If I were to swap out these topaz for malachite, we're going to get the same stats, but the weight's going to be higher and the trash chance is going to go down. So this is where your generic tier 2 versus your improved and your wild tier 2 come into play. I don't mind the high chance or higher chance of trash. We might have to craft a couple of them and scrap some of them in order to get the good ones, but we'll go ahead and get that designed. And then let's jump up to medium armors. So the best medium armor that I could craft right now would look something like furs, and I think we have, yeah, we have iron. And you can see that this is going to give 21 shielding, but it also weighs 137.5 units of weight. So, and it's only physical armor. It does not give you any shielding in mental or spiritual combats. So this is what I was talking about. Significantly heavier, too heavy for even children to wear. Medium armors are okay for characters that are adults and have decent strength scores. We can mitigate this a little bit by using lighter materials. For example, every unit of iron weighs 5, but sandstone actually weighs more. Yeah, so putting sandstone in there is not going to help. How much heavier does it make it? Not much. But we could make armor out of bone, and bone is a little bit lighter. This would be the best bone we have. It's like the lightest medium armor I could make is still 131, and it's 18.9 shielding. So, not great. This would probably be okay. We'll just throw that in the queue for now, just so we have a reference. And for heavy armors, the best heavy armor we have available is probably going to be made with the dark wood that we have nearby and the furs. And this armor is very heavy at over 200 units of weight, but 41 points of shielding for physical combats only. So we'll go ahead and lock those in just as references for the materials and for the stats if we want to compare them later on. At some point I'm going to come down here and talk about these a little bit more in detail, but we're not going to do that right now. Alright, so now you can see all my recipes are over here, and just like before, I can turn off anything that I'm not able to make, but I can also at a quick glance see, oh, what do I need to collect in order to make these? Okay. Also, I've pointed this out before, but you can see on the map here we got our two little green dots. Those are our 2 villages. And I think we just need a couple more turns of gathering here in order to get this boosted and get some better tools. We could start collecting a little bit of iron, but I would much rather have some research happening and just start moving towards the next research point or advancement point. His gathering is not particularly good anyways. Let's spend just a couple more turns here. I want to at least get 1 set, maybe 2 sets of the topaz tools before we move on. This is a random adventure. Again, these things pop up at the end or beginning of every turn. So, and sometimes they don't make a lot of sense. They're pulled from a random pool, and that random pool is dictated somewhat by your location. So, depending on what island you're on, you'll get different ones. I wish it were a little bit more dependent on the type of tile you're in. So that if you were like in a forest tile, you would get forest encounters. If you were on the plains, you'd get plains encounters. I think that would be kind of neat, and maybe it is, but it doesn't always feel like it. It feels like you get some really weird ones sometimes. Okay, let's take a look. Participating groups, we can see that both of our groups, so our children and our adults, little camps here, are going to be able to participate in this fight if we do it. And we can view the details of the group if we wanted to. But all we get told is that this is a level 1 challenge. This is one of the things I don't like about the game. It's not clear at any point, really, what the difference between a level 1 and a level 2 and a level 3 and a level 7, like what is the difference between some of these challenges? There have been many times where I've gone in and I've like wiped the floor with a mid to high level challenge, and then I do one that's similar level or the same level and I get smoked. And it's hard to figure out what these mean until you've encountered them a few times. I've pointed out in the past couple of episodes that we are not capable of fighting right now. We don't have armor, we don't have decent weapons, we don't have warrior class characters in our party yet. And so anytime we encounter these types of engagements, it's probably a good idea to avoid them when we have the option to do so. When we're forced to fight, obviously we got to fight, but when we don't have to fight, it's not a good idea to get into fights until you're prepared. So I'm actually going to leave. And unfortunately, we're not going to get anything, but that's okay. It looks like we got a second one. And this one is almost certainly due to the fact that we have 2 villages. And so one of the things that you could potentially do in order to increase your experience gain is to have lots of groups. Because what happens is every character that's on the board at the end or beginning of a turn basically rolls for a random event. And so the more characters you have out on the field, the more random events you have. But if they're close enough together, everybody gets to participate in the events. So if you find yourself needing more experience, one of the best ways to do that is to split up your party into multiple groups, but keep them close enough together to do the encounters as a team. We're going to go ahead and attempt this. This is what I was talking about. I've mentioned it, but I haven't been able to demonstrate it. So this is a concept challenge. Notice how the interior of the card is blank. It's just outlined in red. Any card that's outlined like that is a concept challenge. And this is a normal challenge. So this is physical fight with rats. This is, hey, let's figure out how to get out of here without fighting the rats. Um, the difference in the combats, again, are pretty important. This combat, you get to use weapons, and any damage that ends up on your character stays on your character after the combat is over. This combat, no weapons, and any damage that happens to your characters does not stay on your characters after the challenge, but if you fail the combat, a negative effect will take place that may lead to damage. So we're going to go ahead and do this one. I think we should be able to handle it. And if not, we'll deal with the consequences. Auto-resolve is showing victory with injuries. And this is another important thing. Because victory with injuries in a concept challenge basically means that you win with no injuries, it's perfectly okay when you get this to go ahead and accept this outcome, because you really can't do better than this, right? It just doesn't matter. So we can accept this outcome, and we'll get a little bit of experience and a physical blessing on one of our characters. Now if we go to our character page again, we can see that nobody actually took any physical damage. Okay, still not ready to build this just yet. Next turn we should be able to. We also got a stack of wood, which is good. We're going to need that later. And one of the things that happens regularly in Thea is a weather event. So wind will occasionally spawn for a handful of turns. This has a negative impact on your faith and sanity. I believe that impact is negated if you are in a village, but it does not work if you are just camped. So our camps are still going to lose these stats. And this effect will just happen for a while, so we'll just have to deal with this dot damage, essentially. It will be important for us to avoid certain types of encounters until we're able to heal some of this off. And one of the problems that we're quickly going to encounter is we're running lower and lower on food. So these guys only have about 6 turns of food left, and those guys had about 20. We're going to need to pick up and move off of this site here very shortly and start looking for food. Alright, we're on turn 13. One of our characters leveled up, and this is the level where we get to pick these, not character stats, but abilities. There's a new ability called Hurry Up, and then there's Luck. We already have 2 points in Luck, or I guess no, we have 1. So if you mouse over it, it'll show you what you currently have. We got 3 points of Luck. Putting this in will give us 5. The Luck attribute affects certain roles in the game. One of the attribute roles that's really important is your character role when they grow up from a child to an adult. There's a character event that will pop up, and it will basically determine whether you successfully learned your job, learned your training, or whatever, or if you didn't. And there is also a small chance that you can actually die if you attempt some of these events when you don't have the proper stats. Having luck helps improve your chances of being successful, and since we do have a child with luck is usually okay. Luck is less valuable when you're an adult, there aren't as many things that you use for luck. It's not included in a lot of rolls, but... Okay, now we have enough to do this. So we're going to show busy characters again, and we can see that this guy, he's got the crafting skill. We're going to throw him on there, and it's going to take him 3 turns to get this done. And I think after that, we're going to move on. We need to get some food and get some wood. We are getting a little bit of wood, which is going to be helpful, but we need to get moving. Alright, so there's 1 turn. Is there anything else? I think we're just going to leave them on topaz and leave them on wood. So a pack of beasts has approached us again. We have to fight this. We will get to use weapons, but we want to avoid damage as much as possible by using armor. Let's see what we have here. So this bee, a blood bee, has 11 health. He has a poisonous bite, and a regular bite, and a brute force attack. So his damage output's somewhere around 6, it looks like. 5 or 6 damage. And then the other one is weaker, and it's going to have a similar 4 or 5 damage. So we should have no problem. Auto-resolve shows perfect victory. Your people have beaten this challenge without losing any hit points. We can go ahead and accept that outcome. And we got 3 beetle jelly. Beetle jelly is also what I like to call honey, but I don't think it actually is honey. It's beetle jelly, and you can figure out for yourself where that might come from. A little bit of experience, and then the second group of enemies also attacked us. We do have the option of moving away this time, but since we did so well with the last encounter, let's go ahead and attack them or engage them again. So there are 3 of them this time. Auto-resolve is still showing a perfect victory. And we got some more beetle jelly. That's going to be helpful when we go to craft some more food here in a moment. So before I forget, let's go to the food page and let's unequip beetle jelly and see if we can't use that in a recipe. We don't have any other foods at the moment, but we'll have to look at that shortly. Okay, some of our characters leveled up. We'll need to grab the appropriate abilities for them. This is definitely high priority for us. Hunter's Mark is a great attack that can be used in concept challenges extremely effectively, but almost any engagement. Poison Throwing Dagger is not a great skill. It's an important skill to pick up in some circumstances, particularly if you have a character with like really high intelligence, because Poison Throwing Dagger can be used in yellow combats and in concept challenges where weapons aren't normally allowed. It also has a very, very fast attack. And that high speed of that attack allows you to play it very early or very late and still get it off early in the combat. But this just needs to be maxed out. So we're going to go ahead and grab that. And then gatherers need more gathering. And our chosen has the ability to improve his gathering or start learning some luck. Adults, again, don't benefit as much from luck as children do. So we definitely will need to gather from time to time. Having an improved gathering stat just makes that easier. So we'll go ahead and pick that up. Alright, let's take a look at our progress here. We are 1 turn away from completing our topaz tool. And we've picked up 15 total topaz. So we've got 15 remaining. If we look at our gathering page real quick, it's going to take 3 turns for us to get another stack. I don't think we're going to be here for 3 turns. I think after 1 more turn, we're going to leave. So that means maybe... Yeah. Maybe we pull them off of topaz gathering. We finish off this research point that we've been holding on to for a while. Since we never broke camp, we've maintained the amount that we were able to gather. And now we throw them over here for 1 turn. We'll finish this off. We'll get the full point. And when we break camp, we won't be losing a lot of our progress that we made. Remember, breaking camp, any of these meters that aren't filled go back to 0. So be very careful about breaking camp. Over here, these guys will pick up some more wood in 1 turn, and they'll be ready to move on as well. And then we can regroup into a single party if we want. And go check out what's up here. So I think that'll be good. Also, we got a low faith alert and a low food alert. The low food alert is definitely coming from this party. We're down to 3 turns of food. I think we're going to run over here and pick up some seaweed and try to use that jelly and seaweed to make some new food items. Alright, and she's a gatherer, so we will increase her gathering stats some more. Pretty simple choice there. We now have a nice topaz tool. So if I go to equipment, we can take this tool and we can put it on her. And her stat is now 13, her stat is 14, so they're both pretty decent gatherers. Alright, now is the opportunity for us to break camp. Let's go grab some food. Start by moving these characters over here. Okay, that's problematic. A sudden storm catches you off guard. Lightning bolts cut through the sky and gusts of wind sweep you off your feet. Take cover or try to outrun the storm. I'm not sure what the difference is between these. Typically, trying to run away gives you less negative effects, but less of a reward. Yeah, so we took a little bit of damage. That's not particularly good, but it's a small amount of damage, so it's not that bad either. Okay, there is a level 2 Lightbringer Swarm. This is kind of scary. We really don't want to fight them. I do have enough movement to get into the water. So this is going to be our first opportunity to demonstrate our raft. And yeah, we do not want to fight this. So 2 things are going to happen. Fighting 4 of these things at once is probably not... I don't know. We'll probably win, but we're going to take a lot of damage. And the fact that our stats are already lower than they normally would be because of the wind... Well, actually, our yellow stat's not that bad. Either way, if we get attacked in purple or red, we're already damaged. Yeah, let's just get out of here. So whenever you're near the shore, you can consume all of your movement and um, get into your ship if you have one in your inventory. And you'll remember we started with a raft by being the Chosen of Streebog. Um, Enemies cannot attack you from the water unless they are in the water, and vice versa. So if we move into the raft, these guys won't be able to come over here and get us, which is good for us. So let's go ahead and do that. Um, Keep in mind that to embark takes up all of your remaining movement points, but you only need one movement point in order to pull it off. So many times it'll make sense to move as far down the shore as you can until you only have one movement point remaining, and then board your vessel instead of just boarding wherever you're currently located. Now, unfortunately, because we're in a raft, we're not going to be able to gather anything. Most of the other ships will allow you to do a little bit of gathering on nearby tiles. Um, but we'll have to build one of those. We don't get to start with one. All right. Well, I think this is probably a good enough place to stop for today. Um, we'll go ahead and pick this video up a little bit later this week, but I am going to continue this series for a while until I get a little bit further in the game and just really continue to go into a deep dive of some of these mechanics and explain things in detail as much as possible, so that if you're new to the game, you can learn as much as I've learned over the course of the last year, both playing and watching other people play on YouTube. So until next time, this has been The Nose Plays, and you guys have a wonderful day.